Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Behind the Headlines. Across the Western world, children are looking forward to a break wherein they go to holiday clubs and attend various functions where maybe it's educational or recreational. This stands in stark contrast to what Palestinian children are experiencing in an ongoing way this summer, wherein they will actually be attending holiday camps designed to indoctrinate them in the ways of terror. I'm joined as always by my good friend and co-host Simon Barrett. This evening we're asking the question, why are Palestinian children attending terrorist summer camps? Evening, Simon.
Hey, good evening, Regan. Good to see you.
It's an incredibly tragic reality that across so much of the Western world we have this wonderful opportunity every summer. I don't know about your experience growing up, but I remember as a child going to there was we called it in the States vacation Bible school, and then here holiday Bible clubs and stuff that churches are holding. You also have church camp. We had church camp, we had music camp, there's band camp, there's football camp, there's any number of camps you can think of, and some really fond memories, some great relationships that were built on those camps, just incredible times as a child attending some of those. And I have to say there was not a single ounce of an idea of being trained up to kill anyone or to serve as a human shield despite being a child. Was that your experience?
I never had that experience, thankfully, but sadly today Palestinian children have that experience, whether it's if they are from Gaza or whether actually from the Palestinian Authority itself and controlled by UNRWA, which is the United Nations Relief Works Agency, provide the education for those Palestinians living under the Palestinian Authority, and we see these horrendous terrorist summer camps that take place. I mean, my experience growing up in the 80s was looking forward to the long 6 weeks holiday of playing sport.
In the States we get 3 months. 3 months.
Well, there you go. That's
3 months of it.
That could explain a lot.
Yeah. Very fair, very fair.
But to be fair, I mean, what I am absolutely horrified regarding this issue is that children are precious in the sight of God. They are the future, and they are to be nurtured and they are to be protected. They are not to be indoctrinated and trained how to use AK-47s, how to knife an Israeli soldier, or how to engage in hand-to-hand combat, or how to pretend to simulate the capture and murder of Israeli soldiers, or firing rockets into Israel, of having your heroes as Palestinian suicide bombers rather than football stars or musicians or Hollywood actors, but instead belong to what I can only describe as a death cult.
Absolutely, and yet this is news. You can find it. This isn't like some sort of niche story that's out there. Yes, most of the world is not talking about it, and you're not going to see this on any of the headlines that are in the mainstream, but even mainstream papers have to report the news, and they will even in some occasions report this. Amnesty International, for all of their agendas, even has had to acknowledge the existence of some of this stuff. According to the Gatestone Institute, back on 8th of July, it's around 100,000 boys and girls have been recruited for these summer paramilitary death camps, and the international community, by and large, Simon, is silent. By and large, in many cases, there is ignorance to it, I think, which is why we're covering it. It's a shocking state sanctioning of child abuse, and it's so important that we discuss and bring to light this very, very dark reality.
I mean, we all know about the dangers of the Hitler Youth. We all know about what happened in the 1930s when Hitler indoctrinated the youth within Germany to become Nazis and become part of the Nazi Party and part of this Nazi ideology in which they were indoctrinated. But we can say the same thing's happening today by the Islamist terrorist organisation Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and even Fatah within the Palestinian Authority, that is doing nothing to bring about peace and reconciliation between the Israelis and the Palestinian Arabs. Instead, what this does, it perpetuates this conflict onto another generation, and these poor children are indoctrinated with incitement, hatred and violence. You see there a small child holding up an AK-47 assault rifle, one of the terrorists' favourite weapons. It just shows you, would you allow a little child to hold a gun? Would you allow them to be involved in bomb-making activities? Would you allow them to be indoctrinated that they are filled with so much hate that they are become the next generation of terrorists, where they have no future, where they have no hope, and where they are being indoctrinated by this horrendous state-sanctioned child abuse?
There's video footage that's easily accessible. It's there on TikTok, it's on YouTube as well, of these role-play scenarios where young children, as young really as 3 years old, are suited up and booted in Hamas, terrorist gear, basically with the slogans, very much like you see. They're running around with, these guns, replica guns, emulating their terror heroes. We have to be clear, this at the early stages is not the child's fault. The child is being taught something and is being groomed and indoctrinated into this. It's a tragedy that we should grieve, that any child is being brought up in this heinous way. I think myself, Simon, as a father of 2 children, is this anywhere on my radar, sending a child to a camp where they learn how to commit acts of terror, where they learn to cause harm to other people, where even, let's remove the violent equation, anything where they're going to be exposed to hate and taught this is your enemy and that these people are the ones who, anything like that, just the very idea is warped. So these children tragically are being brought up, I'll say it, by pathetic excuses of parents who they are grooming them and throwing them out as lambs to the slaughter, essentially.
And that's why it's state child abuse.
It is.
We've had
but the parents are responsible.
But we have inquiries in this country when we have high profile, predators and paedophiles, but this is actually state sanctioned. I mean, this is encouraging children into a life of terrorism and violence and hatred that many young Palestinian teenagers are happy to murder Israelis, because this is the diet that they are fed on a daily basis in their education system, in their media, and their summer camps. Summer camps should be all about having that nice break from school where they can enjoy themselves, where they can play sports, they can have entertainment, and they can just have that break from school life until the next school term. Summer camps should not be used to effectively create mini terrorists, and that's exactly what Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and also the Palestinian Authority are sadly doing, and yet the West continues to pump billions and billions of our taxpayers into the coffers of the Palestinian Authority, and this is how they spend their money. Shocking.
And I think it's important that we acknowledge where this is rooted, why this is needing to be exposed. I'm very thankful for the journalist with Gatestone, who himself is a Muslim, who is an Arab Muslim living in the Middle East, who writes exposing this situation under the title Palestinian Summer Camps to Kill Jews. And Bassam Tawil is honest in revealing the shocking and disturbing paramilitary terror summer camps being run for children living in Gaza by Iranian-sponsored terror organizations Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. These have been run for over a decade. This is nothing new. So lest anyone think, well, this is this is a niche part of what's going on. No, this has been a standard part to which many of us, have been aware of for a long time.
I think what is new is the numbers that are participating in the summer
100,000
camps.
here.
I mean, that's 100,000 school children aged between 10 and probably 17 are actually taking part in these summer camps, which is frightening. Yeah. Almost 100,000 children being indoctrinated into this kind of death cult. This is what should be making the kind of news stories, not talking about whether, I watched a bit of a news report last night saying how for example, our crossing the roads, the level crossing should actually now be extended beyond 7.5 seconds to 10 seconds to allow elderly people to walk across them. That is a serious issue, but I'm saying is that this issue is about the entire future of the Middle East. This whole future is about protecting children that are being abused at a state level from a life of terrorism, of violence and misery at the hands of their Hamas leaders.
We're always grateful to our friends at CBN, and they actually have done a special report taking us inside the Gaza summer camps, training children to be the next generation of terrorists.
They call them the Pioneers of Liberation and the Sword of Jerusalem summer camps, run by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. These videos, posted by Memory, the Middle East Media Research Institute, show what the youth of Gaza are doing this summer.
We did not come here to enjoy ourselves or to play or anything like that. We came with our souls, our blood, our martyrs, and are wounded to sacrifice ourselves for Palestine and for our people.
This promotional video urges students from primary school, high school, and college to participate. In the camp, target practice involves AK-47s, anti-tank weapons, and video simulations.
So that in the next phase, Allah willing, these boys will be able to confront the plundering enemy and disfigure its face in the next war.
In May, Hamas and Islamic Jihad called the 11-day war with Israel the Sword of Jerusalem. Their goal, preparing the next generation for the next war.
We say to the enemy, these children picked up these weapons, and we train them how to use them, as well as how to take security measures, so that they will follow in the footsteps of their fathers and take up arms, Allah willing.
I chose to spend my vacation in the Pioneers of Liberation summer camp in order to continue the path of my father, the martyred commander Walid Shamala Abu Bilal, and in order to strengthen our determination and to liberate Jerusalem, Allah willing.
These young men and boys learn anti-Semitism at an early age.
We asked Hitler why he left some of you alive. He did so in order to show us how wicked you are. We will come to you from under the ground and hammer fear into your hearts, and above the ground we will tear your bodies apart with our rockets. Scram into the shelters, you mice, you sons of Jewish women.
Memory has been monitoring these summer camps for 10 years.
The videos and images from those camps illustrate and reflect the way Hamas is operating and deepening its control. In 10, 15 years from now, the kids will be adults or parents and maybe even an officials in Gaza and decision makers. So the extremism in Gaza will be even worse.
Hamas took over the Gaza Strip 13 years ago in a bloody battle with the Palestinian Authority.
So since birth, this generation has been raised only on the values of these terrorist movements. This is, of course, only deepening the crisis there, thwarting any chance for dignified, peaceful life for the kids and for all the residents of Gaza.
She feels the international community needs to speak up about these camps. While these kids are in camp, Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh is visiting nations like Mauritania, pledging to continue the war against Israel.
Let me tell you, my brothers and sisters, the sword of Jerusalem will not be sheathed until the blessed Al-Aqsa Mosque is liberated.
Given these summer camps, it appears clear the goal is that the battle for Jerusalem will continue into the next generation. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
وأيدينا على السلاح أيدينا على الصواريخ أيدينا على تفجير الباصات أيدينا على العمليات الاستشهادية. 7 مليون فلسطيني برا، بكفيكوا تسخين. في عندكم يهود في كل مكان، يجب أن نهجم على كل يهودي متواجد في الكرة الأرضية ذبحا وقتلا بإذن الله سبحانه وتعالى.
فلسطين من البحر إلى النهر، ولن نعترف بإسرائيل.
اللهم عليك باليهود ومن والاهم، اللهم عليك بالأمريكان ومن والاهم، اللهم احصهم عددا واقتلهم بددا ولا تغادر منهم أحدا.
وبدنا اياكم يا اهل القدس بالسكاكين امعطوا رقاب اليهود كلها تقف على العرق من هان.
أما نحن هنا في غزة فلن يلقوا منا إلا البارود والنار، لن يجدوا منا إلا الشهادة، لن يجدوا منا إلا الموت والقتل.
Well, very thankful to our friends at CBN and, of course, the IDF as well for the helpful report and the helpful reminder as to why Hamas must be withstood. We are now, I believe, Simon, going to have a special interview.
And this week's special guest for Behind the Headlines is David Badin, who is the Director for the Centre of Near East Policy and Research, based in Jerusalem. David, warm welcome to Behind the Headlines, and it's great to see you again.
Thanks, good to have you, and good to have you here in Jerusalem.
Definitely. David, what are your thoughts on these awful summer camps that Hamas are hosting in Gaza? And according to the Gatestone Institute, that Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad have signed up 100,000 boys and girls this year to teach them how to be terrorists. What are your thoughts?
That is the tip of the iceberg. In Gaza, the Islamic Jihad and the Hamas have gotten together summer camps. In the northern Samaria, the Fatah organization, the mainstream organization of the PLO, which supposedly has a peace deal with Israel, they're running summer camps for the same amount of children. We've been filming in those camps. We're right now making a movie and raising money to finish the movie in honor of Rabbi Leo D., who was a UK citizen, whose daughters and wife were murdered by UNRWA residents of the Akhtar camp, and their summer camp is named in honor of the killers of his family. Understand one thing. UNRWA education is Palestinian Authority education, whereas the British Parliament forbid the British Parliament from giving any money to the Palestinian Authority school system. They get the same school system through the PA, through the Palestinian Authority, through UNRWA, through the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. Very important. So that we have been through 1,000 school books. We were hoping to find some school books for peace, not at all. What it is one great long indoctrination for killing Jews. That's the theme. And we just have only this month, with the reissuing of a school book, and for 2023, which will be in the next school year, which begins in 3 weeks, right? Where we have picture and the legacy of Dalal al-Mughrabi, a woman who murdered 36 Jews in 1978, and the school book is dedicated to her, and the school system is dedicated to her. It's very important to understand. You say, oh, that's like the Nazis. The Nazis never had a school book where they said to kill Jews. Here you have it. Now, the British government, as the number 5 funder of UNRWA, has a lot of responsibility for this, and I want to make that very clear. If you are a British citizen, you are paying for an education to murder Jews. Not to hate Jews, but to murder Jews.
And David, can you unpack for us the kind of indoctrination process that's taking place with children in Gaza and within the Palestinian Authority, and the comparisons that we can make that with the Hitler Youth?
Well, basically, the Hitler Youth were only concerned with one thing: indoctrination to killing. If you see the William Shirer videos from from 1945, which as I, as a child, when I was 15, I studied it in 1965 it was, yes. 1965, I studied this stuff with Dr. Shirer, who was the retired correspondent for the New York Times. We showed children, not with hatred, but with indoctrination to murder. The kids became like robots, and that's what we see today. I've been covering the Palestinian Authority and UNRWA for 37 years. At the beginning, I must say that I see much more hatred. The fact that I see less hatred now is not a good thing. The kids have become absolutely, how should I say, what's the word for systematic, can't think of the word.
Indoctrination?
Yes, it's more roboticized. They've become roboticized. They hear Jews, kill them, kill them, kill them. That's their whole thing. And what you have there's actually a song in the Palestinian school book, one of the new Palestinian school books about the importance of obliterating and destroying the Jews completely. And they made 20 little records out of it, distributed all over the place. And the Great Britain and the other 28 major government sponsors of UNRWA have a responsibility to look at this. And the answer we get from the British government is, well, UNRWA has to do it on itself. Sorry, but the fact that there's international money coming in, and these altogether 28 major countries giving the money, $1.6 billion not accounted for, and it's going for organized crime, but also going for this kind of education. And there's no reason that education should continue. If there was supervision, if there was oversight by the British government and the other governments that give the money, it would be different. What happened since our last interview a couple years ago, we were able to get to the United States Congress to convince the U.S. Congress to pass legislation that the UNRWA cannot get money until they sign a contract that they won't use this kind of school books. And guess what? The U.S. money for UNRWA has been held back for the last 2 years because UNRWA says we're not going to change our school system. And the attitude of the U.S., you're not going to change your school system, you're not getting the money.
Yeah. And David, we're about to next month in September mark the 30th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Principles, also known as the Oslo Accords, the peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization known as the PLO, that then became the Palestinian Authority in 1994. Share with us what almost 30 years of indoctrination and hatred and incitement on generation after generation after generation of Palestinian children has had on the Palestinian psyche, and how dangerous this is for the peace process going forward.
The most important thing to know, and you're a newsman, is that the PA, the Palestinian Authority, and the PLO never ratified that accord. We gave that to the BBC at the time. We produced a movie called Vanishing Peace, which was on the BBC, where we showed that they never ratified the accord. The Fatah, the mainstream element of the PLO, never ratified it, and they never canceled the covenant to murder all the Jews, to get all the Jews to murder all the Jews in Palestine and to replace Israel. So there's been a myth, the myth that there was a two-state solution approved by the Palestinians at the time. It was never approved, and the media has done wonders to make sure you don't know that. And if you can see the movie that we produced, which is on the YouTube, called Vanishing Peace. It's right there. You'll see what we revealed at the time. That's a movie we produced in 1999. So the lie, as if there was a peace agreement, never happened. Never peace accord, whatever. And the education, well, that was one of the promises of the Oslo process, that there would be education for peace. I went to Yasser Arafat, the head of the PLO. I said, look, I want to know what you're saying for peace in the Arabic language. And he said to me, you must see our school books. And the PA supplies to our office every year all the new school books. We've accumulated 1,000 school books. We have a top staff going through them, and there's not one word of peace. We were offered by a Reform rabbi $10,000 to show a page, something about peace. I said, I'm sorry, but my integrity is more important. I sent the money back. I can't use it because it doesn't exist.
And David, what would you say to the silence by the international community, by the UN, to the EU, to the British Foreign Office, the silence to what is only be described as state-sanctioned child abuse for these poor Palestinian children who are indoctrinated with hatred, taught to use guns, taught how to use knives to murder Israelis, and prepare the next generation for genocide against Israel. Share us why the international community is absolutely silent on this issue.
There is no excuse for the silence. No excuse for the silence of an entity which endorses murder. It's worse than the Nazis. The Nazis try to cover it up. They don't try to cover up anything. All you have to do with the British government and other governments is ask them, what supervision are you giving to the money you get? 58% of the money, of the $1.6 billion going to UNRWA goes to education. What oversight, what supervision are you giving to the schools? And you'll see the answer you get. Oh, it's up to UNRWA to supervise their own schools. Excuse me, but UNRWA is based on the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization ideology, and the PLO ideology is based on their covenant, and their covenant is a covenant to wipe out the Jews, declared in 1964, a full-scale war against the Jews, never repealed. And the same with the Arab states from '48, their war was never stopped. Their declaration of war continues. So understand something. I say to all the governments, it's a simple and clear issue. In the same way that, number one, the war has been declared and continues, the same way that a new school system has come in, which promotes the murder of Jews, and the egregious thing that the book that I held up before is from 2023. What about asking for the removal at least of this book, which has the praise of someone who murdered 36 Jews in a bus attack? And what's going on here? Why should this image be which is of the terrorist who led the attack, and she was killed in the attack? Why should that image be taught to children? I happen to have a master's degree in social work, and if this is not child abuse, what is?
David, I just want to thank you so much for joining us on Behind the Headlines today. Thank you for the excellent work that you are doing in highlighting Palestinian education and these terrible summer camps, as well as exposing UNRWA as well. Really appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Simon.
Well, thanks to David and also Simon for that very helpful discussion just now. Incredibly important to recognize the complexity of the situation and how many individuals are actually responsible, including, tragically, UNRWA. But one of the things that stands out to me is the reality of how this is rooted in a set and concrete ideology. And this is something that I feel is so often missed in the discussion, especially in the Western mainstream media and in conversations day to day that you will have with people. There's this failure to recognize this is all about ideology. That's why this doesn't change. The ideology is very clear. Don't take it from me, take it from their own words. In June 2022, the PA Prime Minister, Mohammed Sta'id, denied any trace of Jewish history in Jerusalem. It's bizarre. It's shaping an alternative history. We're on the outskirts of the eternal capital, the jewel in the crown, he said, the point where heaven and earth meet, the flower of all cities, the object of longing of the hearts of the Muslim and Christian believers who come to it to pray in the Al-Aqsa Mosque and to walk on the Via Dolorosa. So he even brings in Christians to his warped agenda, and tragically there are Christians who are more pro-Palestinian than they are Israel. We've talked about that before, but he says there's no traces. He says that no Muslim would pray in their church, that is, in regard to the Jews, has Canaanite, Roman, Islamic, and Christian antiquities, and is theirs alone, and no one else has any traces in it, denying any Jewish connection. Bizarre. But then, of course, all of that belief system is rooted in this idea that's carried out and outlined in the Hamas Charter. This is their founding document, guys. I'm all for the liberation of Gaza. The liberation of Gaza from Hamas. Exactly. Listen to this. Article 11 believes that this has belonged to Muslims throughout all generations and finds them as Palestinians. No Arab country or other Arab countries have any right, it goes on to say, be they Palestinian or Arab, because Palestine is Islamic throughout all generations to the day of resurrection, so no one has the right to barter or to make deals or to come to peace agreements. Article 13, Hamas does not want peace. Get that out of the mind. They don't want peace. Peace initiatives, Article 13 of their charter says, the so-called peaceful solutions and the international conferences to resolve the Palestinian problem are all contrary to the beliefs of the Islamic resistance movement. For renouncing any part of Palestine means renouncing part of the religion. The nationalism of the Islamic resistance movement is part of its faith. The movement educates its members to adhere to its principles and to raise the banner of Allah over their homeland as they fight their jihad. Allah is the all-powerful, but most people are not aware. He goes on to say this is all rooted in warped Islamic ideology.
Extreme Islamic ideology. Yeah. Founded from the Muslim Brotherhood, and Hamas is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, founded in 1988 with one sole mission, and that's the destruction of Israel and genocide against the Jewish people worldwide, something very similar to that of Hitler's book that he wrote, Mein Kampf. What's interesting as well, so at these so-called summer camps, or what we can call jihadi camps, where they preach holy war against Israel, terrorism and armed struggle, they chant Palestine will be free from the river to the sea, and we've seen this being chanted at pro-Palestinian rallies, even this country, which is an incitement to genocide. We see that children are given paramilitary training in how to use knives, firearms, hand-to-hand combat, and role-playing to capture IDF troops and firing rockets into Israel. Rafa Mohammed Ben Hoim, who is a Hamas director for one of the Paramilitary Summer Camps, said the following, according to the Gatestone Institute. He says, the camps are part of Hamas activities that focus on the younger generation of liberation and victory. So we will now learn what, if you are a Palestinian child from the age of 10 up to about 17 or 18, this is what you can expect at one of these Hamas summer camps. So in previous years, Hamas summer camps have been focused on familiarizing children with various weapons that include an AK-47, sniper rifles, and RPG launchers. They're the handheld missile launchers, together with mortars and machine gun fire. Children in Gaza at these camps are taught how to assemble and disassemble weapons, how to hold them, fire them, and training in urban and tunnel warfare. These poor children must practice with knives, firearms, hand-to-hand combat, marching and foot drills. The children also stage plays and reenact scenes of fighting and capturing IDF soldiers and firing rockets into Israel. And this year's summer camp theme is not peace, but it's a shield of Jerusalem, to prepare them to liberate Jerusalem from the Jews and to learn how to be human shields. And part of the equation is we have to understand how Hamas operate when they conduct their terror attacks, or whether they fire their rockets and missiles into Israel, is known as asymmetrical warfare, where effectively they put innocent children or women or the elderly in front of their rocket launchers to protect themselves, or if they're in the line of firing between themselves and Israeli troops, they use children and women and old people as human shields to protect themselves. So they don't adhere to the Geneva Convention. They don't wear a military uniform, so you can't distinguish between the two sides. And they are quite happy to put children on the front line to protect themselves. Now, we also have to understand, for example, that this is part of a wider Islamist ideology from the Iranian regime. And during the 8-year Iran-Iraq war, what the Iranians did was they encouraged children to be jihadis. So they had a problem with the landmines that the Iraqis planted. So literally they got these children and they were told, you can have a key to paradise if you clear the mines. So they got children to walk in front of the tanks so they'd blow themselves up to allow the Iranian soldiers through. And now this is the ideology and the mindset we're dealing with when it comes to small children.
Some years ago, there was a very important documentary that covered that. I can recommend it. It's called Cult of the Suicide Bomber. And the reality is these individuals and these children who are sent to these children's camps to learn acts of terror are presented with these stories of martyrdom of small children to get them to aspire to attain to that same glory. It's absolutely horrifying, but you know, they clearly don't understand who the Shield of Jerusalem is. That's the reality. Isaiah 31:5 says, "The Lord Almighty, this is Yahweh, the God of Israel, will shield Jerusalem." That's His promise. And throughout the Psalms, we see that reminder that the Lord God is in the midst of His people. He's in the midst of the city and will shield His people. So whatever they're trying to aim at, whatever they're going to try and get to, this, I don't believe, Simon, this is going to end until the Lord Jesus returns. I don't think it's going to end, but I can be very confident in saying, I'm very, very confident in saying that they will not have victory. God will not allow them to have that victory over Jerusalem that they so desire and seek. Recruitment and registration for these terrorist summer camps for children are promoted through Arabic websites belonging to Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, as well as their social media platforms. Yes, they do have social media platforms. I've accessed their social media platforms. They're freely available to all across the whole free world, which is troubling. That, you know, social media platforms will ban individuals who have Judeo-Christian worldviews and ethics and might post a Bible verse or something, but Hamas is able to have their Twitter account. Yep. It's bizarre.
Or Instagram account, Facebook account. I mean, a couple of years ago, we've actually seen kind of Facebook jihad.
Yeah.
Where we've seen incitement actually being posted on kind of Facebook. As it was called a Facebook intifada. So this is one of the major problems. But also we have to deal with the kind of hideous idolization of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad leaders and terrorists and those who have committed acts of appalling kind of bloodshed and murder in Israel. They are literally the kind of pin-up men for these young children to follow. You know, in the UK, you know, you ask a teenager who they follow, they're going to be probably a football player playing for Man City or Arsenal or Manchester United. There'll be pop stars, there'll be Hollywood actors that are considered the kind of popular icons of the culture. But this one is literally jihadists, terrorists, who are their heroes that they worship and they're told to worship. And they say that one day you can be like them.
And they are given the exciting prospect of senior Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad officials regularly attending the camps. They get to meet their heroes at special meet and greets, and they have a graduation ceremony as well, Simon, probably with some participation trophies and medals and stuff given out by these terrorist dignitaries and stuff. It's such a warped... We're looking at this and we're thinking, sorry, what? How is this even a thing? How is this happening? The idea, the very concept of sending your children to a terror camp where they learn to hate and kill Israelis.
100,000.
Not just, and it's not just about Israelis. It's about Jews. Let's say what it is. This is genocidal mania that these individuals are promoting and enacting. So, you know, it's high time that the UN, the Western world, and its various factions and individuals speak up a bit louder in its condemnation.
No, absolutely. So let's before we go to our next excellent CBN report, I think it's important to realise that this Palestinian incitement and hatred is nothing new, as Regan said at the beginning of the programme. We've seen this for almost 30 years, ever since we've seen the formation of the Palestinian Authority in 1994. This has been a central pillar of the ideology behind Fatah, the PLO, and the creation of the Palestinian Authority to prepare generation after generation into a life of terrorism and violence against Israel. So we see there that the Palestinian Authority and Hamas have been raising generation after generation on hatred of Israel and the Jewish people. They've done this through their education system, through play schools, through schools, universities, mosques and media for nearly 3 decades. The summer camp director Rafa Mohammed bin Horim said that the camps are part of Hamas's activities to focus on the younger generation. Due to its importance, the generation of liberation and victory is how they market it. They says, as in previous years, the summer camps focus on familiarizing youngsters with various weapons. To actually put an AK-47 in the hands of a child is absolutely disgusting. And let's have also a look at this excellent CBN news report that looks at the summer camps being run by UNRWA, which is the United Nations Works Relief Agency that our taxpayers' money helps to fund, and this is a sort of education they're giving to Palestinian children in the Palestinian Authority itself, not run by Hamas.
For 70 years, the UN Relief and Works Agency has operated refugee camps for Palestinians.
It is about time to shut down UNRWA. They are not helping the Palestinians.
Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, tells CBN News hatred remains strong due to shocking incitement found in the Palestinian Authority school curriculum.
Today, a Palestinian child, when he goes to the UNRWA school, he comes out hating Jews, incited, supporting Hamas. It shouldn't be that funding from Western democracies will support such curriculum.
Israel welcomed the U.S. decision to stop funding UNRWA more than a year ago. Researcher David Bedin has studied Palestinian school books and UNRWA facilities for years. He says while it's not likely UNRWA will be shut down, donor nations should put conditions on their aid.
Number one, take the school books away. We have school books here which honor murderers and throughout the books and talk about dying for the right of return. Number two, give people the option to leave the camps. Number three, there's $1.2 billion flowing into the UNRWA camps without any real oversight.
In 1978, Dalal al-Mughrabi led a terror cell that killed 38 people, including 13 children.
She's pictured as a martyr in a new school book for 321,000 children. Dalal al-Mughrabi as a role model for the children who are taught the concept in UNRWA schools of the right of return by force of arms.
The right of return refers to the Palestinian demand that refugees from 1948 and millions of their descendants be allowed to return to their homes, most of which no longer exist.
My name is Rasan Kuwar, and I am a refugee from the village of Malka.
Today, Malka is a busy Israeli residential and commercial area in Jerusalem. Badin's group recently produced a short film in Bethlehem's Aida refugee camp, just a few miles from Jerusalem.
There's no two-state or one-state solution. There's only one state, and it will be Palestine forever. And what was taken by battle will be reconquered through battle.
We must conquer our land by force. This land is our land. There's no way to divide it.
The children grow up with the idea that there is no Israel. It has to be ignored and or wiped out.
Badin believes the seeds of the next violent Palestinian uprising against Israel have already been planted in these camps. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, very grateful to the insightful reporting by our friends at CBN. Some of the lessons that are ongoing in some of these camps are taught by masked members of Hamas's armed wing, the Izz al-Din al-Qassam brigades, and some are even held in Hamas military bases. A boy at one of the camps gave a demonstration of tunnel warfare for Yunus al-Astal, a member of the Palestinian Legislative Council, on behalf of Hamas, who toured the camps with other Hamas officials. At some of the camps, Israeli flags were spread on the ground so that the campers could step on them. Terrorists who carried out deadly attacks against Israelis are presented to the campers as role models, and their portraits feature in the camps and in camp activities. Hamas spokesman Abdel Latin Khanal said the summer camps launched by his group in the Gaza Strip this year represent an important step in building this generation, instilling the status of Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa Mosque in their souls and linking them to their legitimate right to return to Israel and liberation. Canal stated that the slogan, Shield of Jerusalem, aims to prepare the children for liberating Jerusalem. It's very surreal, Simon. I just think back when I was a child and we had Bible camps or whatever, and they all had a theme, and it was like one year, I remember, it was Amazon Outfitters is what it was called, and they had it all centered around the theme of the Amazon rainforest and these people on an adventure, basically, to find the story of the one true God. Some of it was super cheesy. The songs were, I actually have one embedded in my mind to this day, years later. But I just look at this and think, okay, Shield of Jerusalem, actually, it sounds like a really nice title, and we can discover that the Lord who is the Shield of Jerusalem, but it's not about that. It's about you guys, your children, great, you can be human shields on the battlefield. Absolutely tragic, really messed up. In the past, Palestinian Islamic Jihad held summer camps under the slogan, Revenge of the Free, in which hundreds of boys under the age of 17 participated. This continues. It's a yearly, annual thing. And yeah, it's just such a far cry from anything that we would have experienced growing up ourselves.
I think it also shows this is a different culture that we're dealing with, a different cultural mentality as well than we're used to anything in the West. I mean, the only thing that we can really compare this to is the Hitler Youth. And according to the Holocaust Encyclopedia Online, the Nazi Party in Germany in the 1930s tried to extend its influence over all aspects of German society. The Hitler Youth and the League of German Girls were developed by the Nazi Party's youth groups, were introduced to children and teenagers to indoctrinate them into the ideology of the Nazi regime. Over the course of the 1930s, the Nazi state abolished all other youth groups except the Nazi ones in Germany. In 1939, more than 82% of the eligible youth between 10 and 18 belonged to Hitler's Youth or its female equivalent. Hitler's Youth had 5.4 million members by 1940. Jewish children were, of course, excluded. While girls prepared for their future as wives and mothers, boys participated in the military training. And you can see that film called Rabbit as a good example of that.
Jojo's Rabbit, yeah. Yeah, it's horrifying.
Jojo's Rabbit is an excellent film.
Yeah.
Very dark comedy, though.
Yeah.
Says in the last months of the war, as the Allies entered Germany, young boys in their early teens were sent to the front to fight off the invaders. So, you know, I think that's why it's so important, because it's the same hatred, it's the same vile ideology at the heart of this, of Nazism and extreme Islamic fundamentalism, is hatred of the Jews, which is anti-Semitic. And wherever you have that, you have dangerous authoritarian regimes where the state controls every aspect of your life. There is no freedom in Gaza. And I remember going to visiting my Israeli friends back in 2014 after Israel's war against Hamas that lasted over a month. I think it was 6 weeks. And they say, look, what is wrong with these people? Like, Gaza has the most beautiful beaches, probably in the Mediterranean. Why don't they just invest in building hotels, make money, attract tourists, have a good lifestyle? But no, they are determined to destroy us, and that's how they want to live. And of course, what Hamas are doing, what Palestinian Islamic Jihad are doing, what the Palestinian Authority are doing, is perpetuating this conflict for another generation and another generation.
Now, mainstream media outlets very rarely, if at all, report on the summer camps. Certainly they don't broadcast it or highlight it, but ITN did a few years ago. And the state-sanctioned child abuse is largely ignored by UN, world leaders, EU and British Foreign Office, although they are often forced to acknowledge its existence to some degree when pushed. International community and human rights groups, they really, we look at them and say they needs to hold Palestinian leadership to account for state-sanctioned child abuse, but increasingly they don't. You can see Amnesty International, time to time, just to see what dissonance there is in their reporting on Israel and the Palestinian Authority regions, that they will acknowledge. They have web pages that acknowledge war crimes, that acknowledge Hamas and the dangerous ideology out of it, but they still serve almost in effect as a mouthpiece for the same slogans and the same ideology, buying into this idea that Palestine, that the political groupings simply want freedom. In Gaza, I'm sure there are many people who do want freedom. I'm sure there are many everyday Palestinian people who want freedom, who want to be out of this control environment where they're governed effectively by terrorists. Where they're infiltrated with this mindset constantly of hate and aggression. But until the ideology changes, and it won't because it's rooted in religion, it's religious ideology out of Islam, unless that changes, or unless there's a complete tectonic shift in the political atmosphere in Palestine, it's not going to happen.
No, and I think we've also got to have a look at and go back to the kind of 1940s and that crossover of ideologies between the influence of Nazism into the Middle East, particularly with the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Al-Amin al-Husseini, who was a leading member of the Muslim Brotherhood, together with this extreme radical Islamic extremism and that toxic blend of these two ideologies, one a religious ideology, another one kind of Nazism, blurring into one.
Yes.
And that's effectively what we have, and this is the kind of legacy. And also we have the process of how the West dealt with this after the Second World War. It was called denazification. And the only way, I think, that we are going to see a fundamental shift in policy and change, sadly, is if the people of Gaza and those in the Palestinian Authority realise that by supporting this ideology will bring misery upon ourselves. It will spiritually, because we're told in Genesis 12, 1-3, I will bless those who bless you and I will curse those who curse you. So they're already under a curse because they're cursing God's people. They want to destroy them, and no one comes out the other side when they do that. But also the fact is, once they realise that this is a doomed ideology, once they realise that this is just going to heap more and more misery upon their lives, which it will do, this is the only way then you can defeat this. And this is when they need to go through a process of denazification, or in this case, a process of de-Hamasification.
It's very important, actually, and I like how you've tied that in, Simon, because this is an area of history that's often overlooked. We're still in relative recent memory of the Holocaust and its atrocities. It's hard to believe that that's happened within the past 80, 90 years. It's similarly hard to believe, just by the way it's presented, that we have so many mainstream media outlets and Western powers that seem happier to support ideologies and groupings, political groupings that are inarguably, historically, directly influenced by the refuse left over from Nazism. And in the immediate days following the declaration of independence of the nation-state of Israel, we see there were many Nazis, obviously jilted, feeling very disillusioned and alone in various things, who they had a grudge against the Jews. They still had that hatred that was there, and so
and they worked with Nasser's regime in Egypt on this missile program
routinely.
Right? Yeah.
Routinely, these guys.
So we see the influence. But do you want to read out this very powerful warning? And this is to Hamas leaders, this is to the leaders of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, but also to the Palestinian authorities and those at the top of UNRWA as well.
This is the warning. Even in Islam, there's a recognition of Jesus as as a prophet. We believe he's God the Son made flesh. And this is the authority with which he speaks, that authority which comes, that's total. All authority in heaven and on earth is his. He says, if anyone causes these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. It is truly a fearful thing to fall into the hands of a living God. And it is our consistent stand here on this program that we know the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He is the God who will be with his people. He will not allow Israel as a nation to be put to shame, because he has an enduring plan for Israel. He has an ongoing plan for that place. And he says, he promises, this is his promise, that he will bless those who bless Abraham and his descendants, and he will curse those who curse Abraham and his descendants. For Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, those teaching and propagating these harmful ideologies at UNRWA, you are in danger of following in the hands of that living God who judges justly, and that is a terrifying thing. Come to the Lord Jesus and know his love and the love he has for his people.
Regan, great doing a program with you, and I want to thank you for watching this program at home. Not easy, but I think it's imperative that as Christians, particularly those who are Christians who have children and grandchildren, to realise that children in the Western world and then in Britain are enjoying their summer holidays, enjoying playing sports, entertainment, going to the cinema, going to the beach, but not in Gaza, not under the Palestinian Authority. Instead, they are being indoctrinated with hatred and violence to become the next generation of terrorists. We can't allow that to happen. We can't allow this state-sanctioned child abuse to take place at children. We need to let our authorities know in Parliament. So thank you for watching this week's edition of Behind the Headlines.